Hello, Fire Pro party people. This is Jelly Skeleton coming at you with an update to let you know that I am still continuing to work on stuff. So I'm going to give you guys a rundown on the cast so far, and do keep in mind this is only about half of who I intend to be in here, but I figured I should probably give you guys an update just to let you know that I am trucking away and this project is still happening and will continue to be happening. So first off, one of my original characters that has traveled with me from game to game, many a game, Death Penalty. A man who went to prison for a petty crime. Somehow the judge saw fit to send him to prison for a simple jaywalking charge. Well, being a 7'1" monster, he discovered he was quite good at prison fights, and ended up catching quite a few charges by killing people, thus earning the death penalty. But the warden in the prison is a corrupt bastard who sees the potential in making money, so he uses him as a prize fighter. Think of him as kind of like a mix between Nails and Kane. You know, big monster guy, choke slams, you know, gorilla presses, you know, falling power bomb, headbutts, stuff like that. Just monstrous power moves. And then, you guys by now are probably pretty familiar with Mouth. But first, let me give you a little idea what Mouth is actually all about, you see. He was born, he doesn't know where he's born. He just woke up one day behind bars in a freak show. And they just kept feeding him all kinds of things, all sorts of things, you know, and his hunger just grew, and now he'll eat anything. An entire studio was worth of music equipment to improve his singing voice or your ass. And he is, you know, all about, you know, roughneck fighting style. Claws, headbutts, biting, you know, he does a lot of ass-based attacks. You know, he's just a nasty bastard. His special finishing move is that he eats you whole. His other one is the butt munch. I'm sure you guys remember that. Next, we got Crimson Mask. You guys might be decently familiar with him. He is a man who was just a lower mid-card pro wrestler, you know, who was decent to the ring, but really never had much charisma. Kind of like a Dean Malenko type guy. And he saw that his career was going nowhere, so he decided to go with a gimmick change. And do keep in mind, in the world of Death Valley Pro Wrestling, superpowers and magic are 100% real. So he went into an old antiquities store, you know, the kind that's run by, like, some devilish character or witch, and he found a mask, and he thought this mask is the exact thing that I need to take my gimmick to the next level, to reinvent myself. And so he puts on the mask, and the mask transforms his head, much like how the mask transformed Jim Carrey's head into a cartoon head, but instead he became a bloody skull. And the mask took over, and the man who once was is no more, and only replaced by the being created by the mask, and its constant lust for blood. And thus he gained blood magic abilities, and the ability to actually become more powerful when he's bleeding. So, you know, he's one of my favorites. And we have the Chosen One, James Marshall Bison. You like The Rock? Well, he's a lot like that, but mixed with a little Deadpool and AJ Styles. You know, all the skills of a young TNA AJ Styles, all the charisma of, you know, 90s, early 2000s Rock, and the breaking the fourth wall of Deadpool. He's the one who I created the fourth wall breaker for, so he'll have lots of moves where he breaks the fourth wall, taunts, and does various other things like that. He's the one guy, he's the guy created as, like, you know, my quote-unquote top babyface. Then we have Lamb of God, and I need to do a little bit of work on his head with some custom pixel art to make that mask look a bit more like a lamb's mask, connect the ears to the white on the mask, etc. But he is a man, ex-military, and devoutly religious. So much so that he's one of those religious people who just whips themselves in atonement, and he's the leader of a cult-like militia. Really, he's in DVPW not to win any titles, but just merely because he likes to inflict pain and suffering. And so all of his moves are very reflective like that. His finishing move is the torture rack neck breaker, and he uses all kinds of nasty moves like gut busters and various really painful submissions. Then we have, hey, forget about it. It's Tommy the Face over here. A lot of ugly mugs in the crowd look like they've been hit with an ugly stick. And so Tommy the Face is like your stereotypical bully chicken shit heel, right? Just think about the attitude of Big Papa Pump with the cheating of Triple H, you know, with some of the cockiness of Johnny Cage mixed in for good measure. He thinks he's the most beautiful man in the world, and anything goes in DVPW. So he's roided out. Everybody knows it. Doesn't care. He eats a big old bowl of steroids every morning with no milk and a smile on his face. Eat your roidies, kids, before he hits you with the ugly stick, which is his signature weapon. A baseball bat, basically, that says ugly stick on it. Next we have Lord Flatulent, an alien from planet Flatulon in the Flatulus system, where most of the atmosphere is comprised of methane, and if he was to remove his helmet on Earth, why, he would suffocate. But on Earth, much like Superman, he gains powers, but instead of Superman powers, they are powers of flatulent. Fart magic, you might say. And so he uses various moves that propel himself through the air using his farts, as well as using his farts to attack themselves, such as fart projectiles, farting in faces, and more. Next we have Prophet Grey. This man is like Raven, but if he was even more of a bastard. Essentially, he sees everything as hopeless and helpless, and the human race is completely irredeemable, and would promo on about that in ways that really couldn't help but make sense. But people don't want to hear those kinds of things, whether they're true or not. So he's a heel, and he knows all these things, so he plays it up and just as a vindictive bastard who takes out all of his rage and hatred for humanity on whatever poor soul happens to be across the ring from him. He is going to be featuring attacks that use a cane, like a walking stick cane, a fancy gentleman's cane, not a, not a Singapore cane. That he'll teleport around in various ways to attack. Next we have the Bad Guy, a man who was raised by very mean parents and was born quite ugly, and spent the majority of his life being ridiculed, growing up for being ugly, and so when he hit puberty, he put a bag on his head, and he just refuses to take the bag off, even though maybe there might be a beautiful surprise underneath. Ugly duckling syndrome, maybe? Well, you guys are just going to have to tune in to find out. Next, we have Lucky Buck O'Grady, the barroom brawler. And he's one of those type of baby faces that makes his own luck and kind of does heelish things, but people still love him anyway because his charisma is just through the roof. And his catchphrase is, "I'll make me own look." And he does so by using his knee pads to get extra damage off of his knee strike, which he calls the trick knee, his finisher. He also pulls out brass knuckles and does all various other brawling type moves, and he is very much a brawler type character. Next we have King Crab. Because every federation needs to have a king gimmick, so why not a King Crab? And his backstory is essentially he comes from an underwater kingdom known as Crablantia, where the strongest crab will rise above the other crabs and become the king of all crabs. And they do this by testing their might with their crab-based wrestling. And it was foretold that one day a king of crabs that was more kingly than any other king of crabs that came before would rise and then come to the surface to retake the surface for all of crab kind. And thus he has entered DVPW to prove that he is not only king of the seas, but that crabs too can be rulers on land. Needless to say, he has a lot of claw-based attacks and moves where he hits you with his claw. His finisher is a choke slam he calls the Clobster Slam. Next we have the final guy that I've made so far, and keep in mind this is still only half of the characters that you can expect. Suicide. A man who was too punk to stay dead. The bass player for a punk band called Crusted. The band, being very anti-corporate, one day hatched a plan to bomb a evil corporation that was destroying the planet. The resulting explosion killed the entire band, but Suicide was so filled with the rage of punk that you just can't keep a good ghoul down, and he rose from the grave so that he could once more stick it to the man. And I actually gave him the torso spin and all the head removal moves. So he does a lot of stuff like that. His finisher is a jumping sit-out tombstone called the Shallow Grave. And yeah, so that's it so far. And just let me know what you guys think. But, you know, from the wackiness you see, you can expect a mix of your more normal type gimmicks like Death Penalty, James Marshall Bison, The Face, you know, Prophet Grey. But then you can, Buck O'Grady, you know, but then you can expect crazy shit like King Crab and Lord Flatulent, you know, as well as crazy guys like Crimson Mask and Mouth, you know. Suicide, really, anything goes in DVPW. There are no fells, magic exists, and we have necromancers on standby in case somebody gets their head chopped off mid-match. Stay tuned for more craziness. This has been Jelly Skeleton. Peace out, and sit and spin.